But first, we start with the developing news this morning out of Brazil, where yesterday thousands of supporters of the nation's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, breached multiple government buildings. Video shows the moments rioters stormed Brazil's presidential office building, the nation's Congress, and Supreme Court in the capital of Brasilia. The chaos comes 1 week after the inauguration of President Lula da Silva, but falling on a day where there was no official proceeding taking place. The presidential election had already been certified, and neither the nation's Congress nor its Supreme Court were in session at the time of the riots. By 5 p.m. yesterday, riot police and security were able to retake the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace was retaken about an hour later. The Washington Post reports a visibly angered Lula addressed the nation yesterday evening, condemning the invaders as fascists and blamed Bolsonaro for encouraging the attacks by repeatedly questioning the integrity of the electoral process. The region's governor says more than 400 of the rioters have already been arrested. Video shows those detained being loaded into buses and driven away by police. So you notice some similarities?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the similarities in the riots in Brazil and the January 6th attacks.
Yeah, not a coincidence.
They're just not a coincidence.
Not at all. Throughout his campaign, Bolsonaro pushed misinformation about election security to his supporters. He repeatedly claimed that Brazil's electronic voting machines were prone to fraud.
Where did he get that from?
No evidence to support his unfounded
Where did he get
claims.
That from?
The strategy mirrors what Donald Trump and his allies did following the 2020 election. Some of Trump's allies were also involved in spreading lies about the election in Brazil and have been advising Bolsonaro and his son. Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo, who is a congressman in Brazil and was in Washington during the January 6th attack on the Capitol, met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago after his father lost October's election. The Washington Post reported he was also strategizing with Steve Bannon and former Trump campaign spokesman Jason Miller. In late November, Eduardo Bolsonaro tweeted this video of Bannon speaking at CPAC Mexico.
Look in the streets of Brazil. Look at the great patriots in Brazil that at a lot of danger to themselves have come forward and are in the streets of Brazil. And quite frankly, as much as I love the Bolsonaros, and Eduardo I think is going to speak tomorrow, and there's no better man on this globe than Eduardo Bolsonaro or his father. In Brazil, it's gone beyond the Bolsonaros. This was the people saying, no, you didn't follow the Constitution. You use these machines, you use the judiciary to shut us down in the media, and we're not going to tolerate it. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Same in the United States. You know, the people like Kari Lake are not going to give up, and I use as a warning in the great fight that you guys have in front of you, both for the cultural issues, for the political issues, and the economic issues. Once they start taking and digitizing the elections, once they start going to machines where you can't get paper ballot, you don't have proof of ID, you take it away from the precincts, and they start to centralize it in collection centers, that's all done for one reason. That's to consistently steal elections, because they know they don't have the backing of the people.
Last night, Bannon posted on social media, quote, Lula stole the elections. Brazilians know this. He's been talking about Brazil for months, pushing conspiracies and calling for Bolsonaro and his supporters to not accept the results of the election.
We got to start in Brazil with the Bolsonaros and the fight for freedom and the fight for sovereignty. The criminal Lula, the international criminal Lula, the partner of the Chinese Communist Party, is on the cusp with the aid and assistance of the United States government and national security apparatus, who brag about, CIA going down there in the summer, warning the Bolsonaros.
All right, enough. We get the idea.
We get the point.
Trump's not commented on the riots in Brazil, but he expressed his support for this thug several times. He took credit for helping him reach the runoff in the presidential election. Jamie Raskin of Maryland made a direct comparison between what's happening in Brazil and Donald Trump supporters, tweeting apart these fascists, modeling themselves after Trump's January 6th rioters, must end up in the same place. prison.
It is just chilling.
And Michael Steele, this is well. First of all, if you're in Brazil and you see fascists trying to undermine democracy in Brazil, you could be forgiven for asking, wait, how does this guy keep getting arrested? How does this guy keep getting convicted? How does this guy keep getting sentenced? And how does this guy keep out of jail to export fascism and the undermining of democracy? That's part one of it. But part two is, and I know you'll share my feelings as for me, a former Republican, but we used to be the people that praised Ronald Reagan for talking about exporting democracy, for calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. And while everybody freaked out in the West while he was saying that, we heard after the Iron Curtain fell that people were whispering, from prison cell to prison cell in the gulags, there is hope. There is a president who understands what's going on, and we have a chance to be liberated. That's where we used to be. Now we actually, after 240 years of exporting democracy from this country, Jeffersonian democracy from this country around the world, we're now, through Donald Trump, we've got people exporting fascism, election denialism, hatred of the press, hatred of the courts, all the things that Bannon was saying right there and that the people of Brazil picked up on.
Yeah, what you heard there was a lot of projection about the processes of election from a guy who was very much a part of fomenting insurrection here. Look, they're packaging this stuff. We've seen it. We've seen it extend into organizations like CPAC, where they're now going out globally, holding these big events to further instigate and install this mindset. In fact, to be honest, Joe, I was surprised that what we're witnessing now in Brazil did not happen last fall after the election. I thought that there was a coordination that would lead up to when that election was called, this type of rioting, very similar to what we saw on January 6th. But you see now the pattern. You see now laying down the predicate that elections, democracy, the process cannot be trusted. And you feed this into a very narrow funnel of thinking to people who in large measure aren't connected in. I'd be very curious how many of those folks actually participated and thought that, oh, gee, I'm going to be going to jail today for this cause. Folks get riled up. These folks sit back and know it. And you're now beginning to see this and look forward to metastasize elsewhere, which, to Jamie Raskin's point, is important that global democracies and governments come together and nip this in the bud, because this can get progressively worse fast.
Well, and let's be very clear about what you say CPAC and other pro-Trump organizations are promoting. This is fascism. This is the use of violence to undermine democratic outcomes. That's why CPAC goes to Mexico and has Steve Bannon give instructions to the fascists in Brazil about how to overturn a democratic election, how to overturn a democratic government. It's why they go to Hungary, where you have Orban in Hungary bragging about the fact that they hate liberal democracy, that they've moved away from liberal democracy, from Western-style democracy. There are a group of fascists in America, and I mean, if you feel like your job is to overthrow democratic elections through the use of violence, and I can't call you a fascist, then just redefine the term fascist, and we'll get a better term for you. Whatever it is, it's anti-democratic. And they tried it in the United States and they failed. And now they've tried it in Brazil. And this was predicted for months. This was not a surprise. People said that people around Trump and Team Trump were promoting a fascist overthrow of the government down there, violent insurrections against a democratic election. And it happened.
Quite a message the Trump presidency is sending to the world. Katty Kay,